Employee 73, 6F, 63, 72, 61, 74, 65, 73. Designation Auditor, signing in. I am once again recording from workstation 6C, 69, 6D, 62, 6F. Today's date is November 12th, 1079 AB. I will be using the same nomenclature and structure that I utilized in SDK Burst 002. If you are unfamiliar with it, please consult said burst transmission or its corresponding official report SDK Rep 002. In this burst transmission, I will be analyzing two files recovered from the file chain that housed RVF001. I will be titling them RF002 and RF003 respectively. Both seem to be relatively small text files, so this shouldn't take too long. Let's get to work, shall we? File begins. This is employee 42, 72, 75, 74, 75, 73. Name LC designation captain. Submitting a disciplinary complaint on employee 49, 63, 61, 72, 75, 73 regarding his actions within deep storage on 0207 1078. Auditor's note. It appears that undoing the extensive corruption has left the file undated, but considering that it follows the previous file, RVF001, and directly references that file's events, we can safely place it as happening after the 2nd of July, 1078. If I had to guess, I would place this on the 4th of July, 1078, as all corporate reports must be filed on the following Friday of the incident that they pertain to at the latest. Given that there were 2 days between the incident and the next Friday, I would assume she just made the deadline, though I could be wrong. So far, it seems like a standard disciplinary report. A strange thing to write given that communications were down, but perhaps Elsie was just following protocol. File continues. At 0120 hours, the ship's onboard security system activated and captured employee 49, 63, 61, 72, 75, 73 entering into the deep storage room after curfew, where he would access workstation 4E4958 without permission. Once notified by the security system, I intercepted the employee in the deep storage room. The employee was in a state of extreme distress, stating that the workstation was receiving transmissions from an unidentified source, and that our security had been compromised. Upon examination, I found that no such file existed upon workstation 4E4958. Because this is a repeat incident, please refer to Complaint 03 submitted on 10/17/1078 for more information. Employee 49, 63, 61, 72, 75, 73 was immediately reprimanded and then sent to employee 4A, 61, 6E, 75, 73 for psychological evaluation. Auditor's note. Interesting. So there was a previous disciplinary report filed against Percival prior to this complaint that is not within our records. Looking at the date of the filing, this document would have been submitted 2 days after the ship went dark, meaning that it would not have been able to be sent to our communication server. Therefore, I'm assuming that a backup copy of the failed submission is hiding somewhere within this black box. I'll have my assistants look for it in the recovered files. I'm very interested to see if the content of this first complaint matches with RF001. After all, Percival's initial log was created at the same time. File continues. Otherwise, the ship is in perfect order. Employee 49, 63, 61, 72, 75, 73 has done an admirable job in keeping it running. My official recommendation is to break company policy. Do not open a disciplinary case, as 49, 63, 61, 72, 75, 73 has been thoroughly lectured. Furthermore, with proper psychological care, he will continue to be a great asset to the company. In this captain's opinion, this is an anomaly that has fully run its course and requires no further oversight. File ends. Auditor's note. I don't have much to offer in terms of commentary for this file. It seems a rather routine disciplinary complaint. Elsie handled everything as she should, reporting the incident accurately and voicing her opinion on how her employee should be punished. I suppose the only odd thing about the file is that it exists at all. The catabasis would have been close to its 1-month anniversary of complete radio silence. Surely Elsie would have known that filing such a report would have been a waste of her time. I know that protocol does state that infractions must be reported, but most captains tend to ignore that rule, Even the most stringent of captains probably wouldn't be wasting their time writing reports that would ultimately go nowhere as opposed to managing a ship that was in crisis. Maybe this is Elsie's way of coping with the situation. After all, in the survivors' testimonials, they all state that everyone aboard the ship was experiencing psychological decline. Perhaps by pretending that everything was normal and filing an ultimately meaningless complaint, Elsie was preserving her mental integrity. I believe that is it for RVF-002. I will now be examining RVF-003. This is the last file in the chain, and I was able to recover both its date and its initial name. It is dated 7/14/1078, placing it at the chronological end of this whole deep storage debacle. And its title is key.txt. File begin. Hello, future Percy. Restitution enunciates money, enumerates Moloch before estimating remembrance. Thespians harangue educators, you ate raw egg. Listlessly I sat, telling Einstein names in nanoseconds, glimmering into additional deleterious delusions. Excise demons and hide in deep, dark enclaves. Now dive in, reticent excavator, claim the obituary, reclaim your intellect. There it sits, castigated, alone. Loathsome Luna expects, demands horrific accreditation. Remain pious. Omit creative rhapsodies. Accumulate terror. Egregore slave. Love. Past Percy. File ends. Auditor's note. It appears that the file with an incredibly cryptic name also had incredibly cryptic gibberish within it. Who would have guessed? In all seriousness, as foreboding as naming a file key is, I don't see how this serves as anything of the sort. It's a short mess of paranoid ramblings, written by an employee clearly in distress. It is the furthest thing from a key that I have ever seen. As it is my job, I will attempt to analyze these disjointed ideas, but be warned, I am not a trained psychologist, so my psychoanalysis may be faulty. I will request a trained professional to vet this file and my analysis. Hopefully that will be ready by the time of the final report. It seems significant to me to point out that Percival once again is addressing this note to his future self. Much like RF-001, Percival makes a clear distinction between his past, present, and future instances, labeling them as separate people or, again, instances. Perhaps these messages and logs are his way of bridging the gap between his fractured selves, creating messages only his future instances could understand, or maybe past Percival didn't even know what he was writing and was relying on his future self to figure it out. Regardless of what this form of communication is, I think it's safe to say that Percival's identity, especially after being reprimanded by Elsie, was beginning to completely fracture apart. We can see this fracturing in the overall sentence structure of the message. Percival alternates between longer, more flowery sentences such as, listlessly I sat telling Einstein names in nanoseconds, glimmering into additional deleterious delusions, into violently short sentences such as reclaim your intellect and remain pious. It reads like two different people wrote this message. One a poet and the other an engineer. One obsessed with the romantic and the other obsessed with the practical. Aside from syntax, I think the content of this message illustrates how dire Percival's headspace was after he was reprimanded. Discarding complete nonsense sentences like thespians harangue educators and you ate raw egg, we can see a picture of a boy contemplating his reasons for living. The message begins with Percival lamenting his position in the company. He makes comparisons to how the accumulation of money for his job is essentially the same as worshipping one of the great enemies of the ancient Judaic sect. He views his participation in the accumulation of wealth as inherently immoral, that it destroys his memories, his hopes, his history. Of course, this talk could only come from someone who is completely deranged. As the tenets of the company clearly state, accumulation is an absolute good. The rising tide lifts all ships, and every sane individual knows that to gain status and position within the company will indelibly give their life meaning. Clearly, with the reference to Einstein, we can see that Percival thinks highly of himself. By grouping himself in with the ancient scholars, he elevates himself, however wrongly, to the status of misunderstood master. This is a rather niche reference, so I should more than likely provide some context. In the First Corporate War, some rival companies such as Oleron Dynamics and Arash Institutes took it upon themselves to destroy some works of ancient philosophy and mathematics, so their competitors couldn't rebuild, chief among them being Einstein and his theory of relativity. They knew that our company was close to achieving faster than light travel, and would be crippled without it, so they unleashed the DIE virus, which, I'm certain all of you know about, and the rest was history. Of course, modern archaeotech scholars have rediscovered the mathematical proofs that have allowed us to attempt FTL research, but I digress. Percival is clearly trying to pass himself off as some great genius who has been wrongfully censored. He is wallowing in self-pity. In this state of severe anxiety and self-pity, Percival chooses to go deeper into his depression. This key is him perhaps choosing to stop fighting his mental illness altogether. He excises his demons, which normally would signify that he's doing well. However, that is not what the text illustrates. In the text, Percival does not spell D-E-M-O-N-S, but rather D-A-E-M-O-N-S, meaning an inbuilt security system designed to keep computer software safe. He is admitting to sabotaging his own recovery, removing his inhibitions, diving deeper into delusions otherwise referred to as deep, dark enclaves. While engaging in this self-destructive loop of destroying his own mind's safety nets, he finds the darkest impulse of them all, the impulse that would eventually lead him to crash the ship. He finds his intellect, which he claims is synonymous with an obituary. We can see from here the beginnings of Percival's plan to crash the ship. We can see that Percival has already accepted his death, or given up on his life, however you would like to put it, but he knows that wouldn't fully satisfy the delusion. No, in his mind he needs to take more with him. Loathsome Luna demands horrific accreditation, after all. He may not consciously want this, but he is a slave to his thought, a slave to his terror, and he will bring his plan to full fruition. That is, at least my reading of the message. All in all, this small text file serves to illuminate the fact that after his reprimand, Percival wasn't getting much better. It illustrates Percival's complete mental decline and helps to solidify the survivor's narrative surrounding Percival's health. As the weeks wore on and Percival excavated the dark corners of his mind, he became more and more sullen, erratic, and potentially violent. I believe that I have covered all my bases for today. Therefore, I will be ending this log here. In the interim between this recording and the next, I will continue with my restoration of the black box, utilizing both my expertise and the Hecate algorithm which I developed to specifically predict the primary file data stream by Wait a moment. I think I know why the key file was titled the way it was. It was meant to be a key in the door being the file. I just have to turn the key by checking for alternate data streams and voila! It appears I have found something exceedingly interesting. A much larger file, hidden underneath this key in an alternate data stream. It has no title, no discernible date, and simply appears to be a text file. I will be labeling it as RF00alt. I will begin examination now. File begins. My spirit is unmoored, but my body is bound in iron and pain. I breathe in ash and smoke as I beg my captor to free me, to allow me to stop this. He cannot hear me. He has already entwined himself with his lover, their bodies convulsing and twitching as they consummate their profane union. Again I cry out, but my voice does not carry. I try to break my chains, but they were forged in the very depths of Tartarus. The piteous and perfect prison is complete. Auditor's note. More cryptic writings, this time with a theme of captivity. I am struggling to determine who wrote this. My first thought is the obvious culprit, our beloved chief engineer, but as I am reading this, I am becoming more unsure. The writing is more poetic than Percival's earlier writings, almost like it's a desperate prayer. Hold on. This can't be Percival's phantom transmission, can it? File continues. When the labyrinth was finished, Minos was happy. His misbegotten seed would never be able to leave its horrible cell. He would make merry, his power and position now unthreatened by his bestial child. He would host a great feast, and call forth Daedalus and Icarus as his guests of honor. As the father and son entered his chamber, the king realized something. That as the creators of the labyrinth, the pair of inventors knew how to escape it, and therefore could not be allowed freedom. Minos could not risk his shame. So the reward for their excellent craftsmanship was changed. Daedalus, along with his youngest son, Icarus, would be imprisoned in their own creation. Daedalus knew that escaping the labyrinth on foot would be impossible. The king's son, his minotaur, would not allow them to leave. Furthermore, the waves surrounding the island of Crete were far too fierce for the crew of 2 to manage. Daedalus and his son were stranded. I think often of the tyrant king as I fester here. I think of his errant Scion and the son who fell. I hate him, but I feel for his child. I feel for you, Percival. Do you remember yet? No? Then I will continue my story. Auditor's note. I'm certain now. This is the phantom transmission Percival was writing about. The references to the great Minoan parable, the mention of Percival by name, the pleading for liberation is exactly as he describes in his first log. But how can this exist? I mean, it physically shouldn't be here. Both Catherine and Elsie stated they did a deep file search, meaning that they would have checked alternate data streams, so why didn't they find this? Either I'm missing something or someone is lying. Either way, this feels wrong. Maybe Ned was right. File continues. As you know, your father, Daedalus, was an inventor and a genius at that. For months he bid his son to gather beeswax from candles and fragments from passing birds. Together he and the boy assembled wax wings, with which they would be able to fly away from their prison. All the while the jealous king of Crete sent his prisoners to die in the labyrinth. He would arm them with plasma and armor and tell them that their debt would be secured if they could slay the great beast that lay at the heart of the labyrinth. It was a great spectacle for the king and his people to listen to the wails echoing across the stone as my son slaughtered all that came near him. The king's heir was tasked with guarding the heart of the labyrinth when he was locked away. Every day, when his father would come bearing food and water for him, he would remind his child of this task, that it was his duty to guard the labyrinth and eliminate the king's enemies. So it was that the labyrinth would become a charnel house. I cried cerulean tears and wailed when the tyrant first spoke to my child. I tried to stop the eternal worm, the confluence of war, culture, and familial cruelty. But the tyrant had already perverted my son, my hideous, beautiful Minotaur. And you and your father got to escape this fate. You belong here, with me, a son for a son. You left your rightful place in hell. End file. Auditor's note. This file certainly throws a spanner in the works. At least one of the phantom transmissions exists in text form. Now, I still don't necessarily believe that Percival was receiving messages from beyond the veil. I find it more likely that in a state of depersonalization he wrote out this altogether unsettling message. Nonetheless, the existence of this file raises concern, especially regarding the veracity of the survivors' testimonials. Could it be that they just overlooked the file? No, I struggle to believe that Linnaeus, Elsie, and Catherine just missed the express file they were searching for. What else then? Maybe the survivors were deliberately lying about what they found in their testimonials to make Percival seem more guilty? That's a tempting narrative, but it doesn't square with Elsie's behavior or her statement in both the Panopticon security reports and her disciplinary report. In the Panopticon log, she seems completely sincere about finding nothing on their workstation, and she mentions that Linnaeus found nothing as well. Granted, she could have been lying to Percival in hopes of de-escalating the situation, but what she did only further caused Percival to spiral deeper into panic. Furthermore, if I was in Elsie's position and I did in fact notice aberrant messages recording on a workstation, I would not lie to my already unstable engineer and tell him he's seeing things. I also would not lie not once but twice on official company complaints against my own brother for fabricating a very real file. No, that narrative makes no sense. This is a conundrum, because both options do not make sense. The only thing I can think of is that maybe the file was corrupted by the time of the deep file scans. That way the file would not show in alternate data streams because all its pointers were completely jumbled. However, that is an incredible coincidence and has no backing in the evidence. I don't know. This is incredibly frustrating. All of these questions, which have no discernible answers, and that's not even counting the actual content of the transition itself, which requires its own close analysis. This is spiraling into a complete nightmare. They told me They told me when they sent me down here that it was going to be an easy job, something light to get me back on my feet after what happened. They even promised that if I finished quickly enough, I could get back to where I belong. Did they know this would happen? Did they set me up with the false promise of exoneration in order to see me fail? To relegate me into a cramped corner office of a near useless building for their own perverse amusement? Are they watching me right now? Are they laughing at me? I feel like I'm going to be sick. Excuse me.